Okay, so we've got this beautiful topic of mesmerising ripples on at sea or in the water. And they really are, whichever one you decide to do, whether it's this one or let me find the other one. This one, which is the most challenging in the time. If you've got a lot longer, then absolutely fine, or you want to start it and finish it, then that's absolutely fine. This one, which has got the ripples, but it's not quite as I wouldn't say as kind of ripply as this one. So that's why I've chosen that one over it. And then this one, which has got the four boats and the reflections as well. So, I mean, by all means, go for the one you really want to do. I think it's just really about the expectations of how much we can get done of that and to be able to build the picture up. But of course, if you work really quickly, then that's you can do the other ones you'll get more, you'll be on with that. But seeing as we're relaxing whilst we're doing this. I don't want to put pressure on the people to feel that they have to get that done. So, just take this little edge down here. Yeah, so I mean, this one I find is quite lovely, in that you've got these lovely tones as well. The colours are beautiful, aren't they? We've got quite a few angles and things like that. So really, I would be thinking about, the halfway mark. This helps. It does help with the angles, actually. So I'm just going to kind of look at halfway in here. It's about there. Really, it's just to get a sense of the boat, whereabouts it comes and where it comes through. It kind of comes through this middle here. And again, there's a few angles on this boat. So again, pencil anything, just to kind of have a little look, like this. Translate it to there, or you can hold a brush, that's easier. So I'm literally just moving that across for a general idea that it kind of starts here. And I can fact check it. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a bit straighter. So I'm just going to pop in this on down to just about the middle. Maybe it's just below the middle line where it starts to kind of come down. And then this one comes across just underneath the middle here on the side. And again, like this angle backwards is stronger than this angle across here. So I'm just really looking at whereabouts within this quarter, this kind of middle centre of this boat here comes. So it's about there. So it is further over this side, isn't it? So I'm just going to pop that in to help myself. And again, because we're going in with pencil, we don't want to put too much pencil on, too darkly. And then again, I'm just fact checking this angle here. So the reason I popped the boat in pretty much is because it's a big, block of a big block there. But of course we can adapt it and change some of it if we want to as we're going along. And then we've got this part of the boat at the front here. Coming down. And again it kind of curves over, doesn't it, and comes down there. And then we've got this section, and again we've got all these little angles on there, so we're looking at that. It's not like that's straight across, isn't it? So it's only angled slightly down, and then again it follows across the top. So all we're doing is kind of fact checking. We've not got any fancy equipment or anything to do, we don't really need it. And then there's a bit of the bow of the boat, the front of the boat underneath here. There. And pop that in because I've missed that. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of other colours and things on here. I'm not going to put all that detail in yet because at the end of the day, I'm just kind of getting a few I'll block in some of the colours first. I'm just going to bring my board down because actually this is where it gets interesting, isn't it? So my board isn't A size. So this is where when you're translating shapes across, sometimes it's helpful to kind of make sure that your board is of an A size. Mine is more squat, so I'm just taking that bottom bit out to make it more A size. Otherwise, these proportions may be a little bit out. You know, I was thinking that's quite tall at the top there. That's rectified that issue then. So there we go. Now, the only other thing, I might just pop in a little bit, but again, you know, you don't actually even need to, but it's just whereabouts. I'm just going to do a really light squiggle because I'm going to go over this with paint, but I'm just bringing this across. If that was the middle there, here, like this line, just bringing that angle across of the water. We've got a slight angle on this as well, haven't we? But again, you can fact check that. I mean, we'll be painting over it, but sometimes it's just quite nice to have something in place. And a lot of this really is thinking about, you know, there's quite a lot of colours when we start to look in here, and I'll really help you with where to tackle this and where to go first. The water itself is actually quite, you know, quite soft and kind of got some grey tones in there. So I think because the part of this boat is quite prominent, we're going to get this boat in first, whereas we did it the other way around today because the colour, so when we did this one, and this is what you might need to think about, there's so much colour and it takes up the whole viewpoint really because you're drawn in by these reflections here because it's got strong colours in the water. We did that first. But here I'm going to take the boat first, and then when we put this underneath, it'll have a little bit more, you know, more bearing because that's the bit we see first on here. So the beauty we've got here are all these lovely, you know, little textures and things on the boat and the wood, you know, the paint chipping off and things like that. So like anything with the acrylics, if we think about building those colours up, some of those colours we may use again in the water as well, so we can look at that. So we've got, even within this boat, lots of tones. We've got the shadow bits underneath where obviously this bit sticks out a little bit, it's kind of more rounded, and then underneath it goes darker. So thinking about all of those lovely blues that you've got, I'm going to go in with a mixture of blues. I'm going to put out some phthalo blue, some ultramarine, so they're all different when we mix them with white. If you've only got one blue, that's absolutely fine. I'm also going to go in with a tiny bit of Payne's grey. This is a dark blue, but we can make Payne's grey up as well by using a tad bit of brown in our water. So I'm looking at all these colours on the boat and in the water just underneath it. I'm going in with some ordinary brown, some burnt umber, and some white because I want to make a tint up to go in with these lovely blues and probably some of the browns as well. If I I was making a right noise today. There we go. What else have we got on there? We've got some nice red, haven't we, at the bottom? A little bit of this kind of sandy colour. Ooh. So I'll go a bit of a yellow out, or a bit of this slightly warmer. I might push a little bit burnt sienna out next to this brown, the bottom of the wood. And what else have we got here? Some red. So I'm going in with some Cajun red. It's a bit more on the orange side, but you can always make your red a little bit warmer by putting a little bit yellow in. And I may even do that yet. So I may just pop a little bit yellow out anyway. Now, I may also go in with a bit of cerulean. So cerulean blue is your more turquoisey colour. I think it's whatever you've got really. And one of the things I am going to suggest is go for it with colour tonight. So if there's another colour you've mixed, doesn't look exactly like the picture, but you love it, just go in with that because this is what we've said before. You know, I know I always say it's so important to really love your colours. Sometimes you just mix them and you think, oh, that's so nice. So absolutely use it. So let's have a little look at what we've got here. I was going to get a tiny bit of those. Mine's gone off. Just in case that red's a bit not warm enough, which I'm going to do. I've got a fair few colours there. I mean, you can even like, you know, change the colour of the boat if you want to. So when we're looking at this boat, for example, I'm just going to get a mid-tone on it and a dark tone here. This light colour in the middle is really, really quite bright. So you can mix up a few if you want. So let's have a little look. And again, the testing of it will really help. So some white paint. I'm actually going to try a bit of this phthalo blue. Now the blues are so strong, so much stronger, that you don't need hardly any of that pigment mixing in for the lighter colours anyway. So I'm going to take this as my mid-tone, I think. I'm going to just test it first, see if it looks like it. Just because I'm really liking that. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to go in with that colour. But so that's what I'm going to put around the middle area. But these side bits, I'm also going to kind of bring another colour in, and I'll probably put them on at a similar time. I'm going to go with the same phthalo blue. Now you can, of course, just use ultramarine. And I'm going to put a tiny bit of this shadow, a tiny bit of Payne's grey in there. And obviously it's quite soft. So this is very dark at the minute. So I'm going to take a tiny amount of that. And test that one. And this is where what I was saying about, you know, if you love a colour and I'm really liking that, actually I might even change my boat colour or use that a little bit in that water because I really like it. So I might mix up a bit more of that knowing that I really like that one. For later, maybe for the sea. And find a different coloured shadow. So I'll try that again in a moment. This is the joy when we mix in paint, isn't it? And we think, oh yeah, that's nice. So I need a contrast somewhere to this one where there's shadow. Actually, I'm quite happy that's slightly darker. It's not quite as light as that one. Go down this side, or you could go in with a totally different blue. Just give that a wipe off. I could go in with the ultramarine and a little bit of Payne's grey. As I said, you can, if you haven't got Payne's grey, just pop a little bit of the dark brown in. And more of the blue and a little bit of the white and see what happens. So that's a different shade. That's with the ultramarine. So I'm still testing these shadow colours that are on the boat. Let's see what that looks like next to it. Yeah, I think I do quite like that one actually as well. Slightly different. So then we're just needing to really kind of get a nice cover on here. Getting the shady sides in a little bit where the shady ones go, where there's a bit more shadow. See, even here I'm looking now, that's a little bit more turquoisey in there. So I may actually mix up another bit of one that's a bit shadowy then. And we'll try a bit of white. I'm going in with a cerulean for that. And a little bit of the phthalo blue. And that's quite bright, which I actually really like. So I quite like that as a contrast, but maybe just a tiny bit more white, and otherwise we'll have a very strong shadow over this side. And this is obviously where the sun is catching over here. So I don't want it to be too bright. So let's see that one. next to there. Okay. So I'm going on with a little flat brush just to kind of get these in place, but use whichever brush you're most comfortable with. But I'm going in with this kind of mid-tone. Now I know this is brighter than on there, but that's fine. A nice decent amount on. And the lovely thing about these the flat brushes is you can kind of get quite a good coverage. Okay, so we just popping these colours on, these different mid-tones. I haven't put the very lightest in because I'm going to do that over the top. But we can almost, as we get down to the bottom, we can almost follow some of the shapes, can't we? The way it's going. I haven't put the dark in yet. I'll pop that in as well. Some of those lovely textures as well in the wood. Yeah, and all of the boats and all of these pictures have got different tones. Some are lighter, some are brighter. And I'm going to go in now, start to pop in one of these tones. I think I'm going to use this softer one up the top. And when we're popping this on, even that is kind of like in a layer, isn't it? So it's just observing really where, what direction they're facing when it's coming out kind of between those panels. And you can see mine's not very neat yet at the edge. I'll edge that off when I feel it's in. I'll pop the shadowy one on first to edge it, and then I will put the highlighter over the top. The beauty is we can kind of get these lovely textures. So I'm trying to follow down the shape it makes and the angle. So yeah, we're just trying to get into some of these lovely shades that we've got here. Building that up. kind of, it's casting a bit of a shadow over there as well. So we can work that in a little bit if you're still damp. And then also, thinking, are there any other colours in there? Some may be even darker near the bottom. Just see what you're seeing. I'm going to make this even darker just here. I feel like it's really sinking downwards. That colour's getting a bit more depth into it then. Still lots of other little colours and things to pop on, but I'm just going to where it is. And then looking over this side, I was saying it feels a bit brighter over here. I'm going to try and bring over some of those brighter colours over this side. So they still feel like they're a little bit shadowy, but they're bright, just slightly brighter. And just build it up. Good fun. And then any other colours you want to weave through over the top. Start to think about those. It might be that you want to put a brighter tint on somewhere with more white. So what I'm going to do now. Just between where it's catching the light, isn't it, on some of them. So you can use the edge of a brush, like a flat brush for these lines, or I don't know if anyone did invest in a rigger brush, which is basically a long, thin, about an inch long they are, brush like this. And really you can just roll it in your paint like I'm just doing here. It shows a good covering goes on there. And you can just kind of pull it in the direction you want to go. Great for sails and things like that. It just kind of takes a little bit of work out of it, I would say, is what it does. And just start to just kind of drag it. So you drag it along. I tend to try and drag it in upwards motion just because it's easy. But you can drag it in all directions. And I just keep taking it back to the paper, to the palette and rolling it. And going over with some of these, these are kind of the last marks I want to pop in over the top because I can't really see them either, can you, down the bottom? Quite light. But yeah, you can go as bright as you want. But I'm going to make sure I've got the tones underneath that I want first before I start putting those final lines on. And where you've got these kind of little areas here, I'm just going to try and replicate what I think I can see. And again, that's all we can do, what we think we can see. And we're all looking at it differently, thank goodness. start to build in some of the lighter, brighter areas. And you can even go in with a real high, a really bright one if you want to. Kind of replicate some of these textures on the wood. I'm just, again, popping just a little bit on the edge of my brush. Just make it feel really nice. Just go with it, just wherever your brush wants to go. Start to dab these on. It is very nice and light and bright around this whole area, isn't it? All around here. So just keep dabbing where you can see. And I'm just going to go over with this little rigger brush over some of these. Looking at the angle all the time because it's slightly different over this side of the boat. And they're quite faint as well in places, so don't be frightened of making those fainter as well. And building those up. You can even get your rigger and wiggle it as well if you don't want it to be too definite like this. There are some kind of wiggly, textury bits on this bone, aren't there? I'm just going to pop this in just kind of along the line, but I'm going to break the line up a little bit, but bring it along the bottom line here. I do think it's catching the lighter bit at the top of that red. So again, while we're going in there, you can have a look. Is there anything else? Any other colours? Is there any shadow? Now, you can put as many of these ropes and things on as you want as well. If you don't want some of one, that's fine. There's quite a strong shadow one here. So whether you want to pop that in is up to you. I'm going to pop it in this time. In with a bit of Payne's grey in there. But again, what I am doing is I'm breaking this up a bit so it feels more shadowy than it does, it definitely is something. All the way down. But again, as I said, just use your flat brush and just use the edge coming down as well. That's the other way of doing it. And then a little bit of this. Again, it seems to be broken, this line. And coming up. There we go. And then we've got, these other little bits here, like we've got I'm just going to mix up some colours with these blues so it's not as bright, but it goes underneath, just under here, where we've got this shadowy section in there. I'm breaking that line up again. There we go. And then again, you know, the highlights on the top of this as well, so we can pick up that this really is kind of sticking out. But again, I'm still breaking this up when I'm doing it. Just make it a little bit brighter. Brighten them up as we go, or whatever, you know. Really good fun actually looking at all of the colours on there, isn't it? It's really nice. We haven't even started on all those lovely ripples yet either. It's nice, isn't it? So we've got this little section coming down, haven't we? So I'm going to go in, find a colour, a sandy colour, something I can mix with that. Just make sure between your blues and any warm colours you've got your brush is washed off, otherwise we'll end up with this muddy colour. So you could go in with a yellow, or you could go in with a sandy colour, or you could go in with a, I'm going to go with a bit of this burnt sienna, bit of white mixed up with it, and the brown in the background on the boat. Okay, and try and get in, it's reflected nicely in the water, it's this colour as well. So we can see that there's some wood on there. Not there. I'm just kind of piecing these bits together really is what we're doing and working out what's going on. Starting to see then these other colours appear. It's a fantastic study, is this, in observation, really looking at all the different tones and colours and the bits on the boat there. And then a little highlight. Could even just do a yellow even if you want to, but I'm doing that highlight in the middle here. I've gone in with a bright, and that's a bit unusual. I've gone on the bright, gone in with a bright yellow, and then I'm going to pop some colour in there. And then bring some of this brown over here, very lightly. The edge of my flat brush. And I think I'm going to get this red in. Now again, we've got something quite dark, isn't it? It's much darker. So there, because it's in the shadow, I'm going to try and replicate that. So I'm going to go in with, it's almost a bit purpley at the bottom. I'm going to go in with a tiny touch of blue in there, just to make it feel like it's in the shadows. And we know that blue colours, cool colours, go backwards and recede like dark ones do. So I am just darkening this whole side down here at the bottom. Just near the bottom there. A little bit, tiny bit there. And then thinking about, you know, a bit of a brighter, reddy yellow colour there. So I'm just going to mix with a bit of red and orange, red and yellow there, and make it slightly brighter hue. But I'm not going to go in with white. I'll show you why in a moment. The highlight I am going to. I don't want to take away that brightness of that colour, because sometimes when you've got lots of blues and things, it's quite nice to have a pop of a reddy colour. If we put white straight in it, it'll just make it very pastel-y. So, follow this colour where it goes. Those nice reds on. We haven't got any edge to our boat or anything yet, but that's fine. It's really quite enjoyable, isn't it? All these lovely colours on this boat. So even within this section, we can then kind of go in with a bit of a highlight if we want one. So like where you get a little bit of shine on it, that's probably there where I would go in and add a little bit of light colour too. I'm going with a round brush now just to get a little bit of detail on. So I am going to add a bit of white along to this tint. Just it's almost like a bit pinky, but I can make it a bit brighter, adding a bit more colours back in. And just ever so slightly where we get a little bit of reflection, a bit of lightness. Just going to go in with a pinky tone over the top. It's not really white, is it? I'm just topping up with some dark colours near the base and everything. Now, obviously, if we look underneath the boat, there's these really dark colours, and you can put those in before you put them in the water if you want to. I'm just going to pop them underneath. I've gone in with Payne's Grey here. It just kind of sets the side, sets the beginning of the water, cast that shadow underneath it. You put that on with a flat brush or any brush really, actually. I've just continued to use this rigger, but no need to really. And then you'll see that you get other colours in that as well. So it starts to become more obvious it's water. So like the edge is a little bit bumpy as though it's in the water. So it's those kinds of things we look for when we're thinking about the effects of how that behaves on the water there. And just the start really. So in terms of, any other details, we've got all of this kind of lovely brown markings. I'm just going to mix that with a tiny bit of white, and I'm intentionally making it a bit more pastel-y because I can build up the colour. And just starting to tap in really where the paint's chipped off. It'll look really odd on its own, but once you start to get some of the darker ones, you can tap back in as well when you know, to make them a bit brighter. Yeah, when you start to get all the patches together, it makes much more sense. But yeah, just kind of recreate those very patchy bits of paint where the paint's flaked off. And you can put as little or as much as that on as you want. If you don't really like it, then don't, you know, it's absolutely fine. There. That's the beauty though. When you're doing textures like this, it's just like that dabbing it really, because you get like a stipply effect from where your brush is. And over here. And then again, you know, you can work into it to break it up a bit further with a bit of, you know, a lighter colour if it's too blocky. Or you can darken some of the areas. Just add more brown. It goes over that shadow, wasn't it, as well? So yeah, it's really good fun, isn't it? So, okay, yes, I'm just going to neaten up this little edge a little bit. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach for neatening the edges out. So this one, I'm going to neaten the outer blue edge, just kind of like that. But then what I'm going to need to do with a lighter colour is then take the edge and make that the edge of the, you know, these lines kind of come round, because that's what they do, isn't it? They protrude like at the edge of the boat without them being too brightened. And then it gives it a little bit more kind of a 3D effect. I mean, you can go back in and think, you know, if there's any, you want to put more shadows or whatever in, then by all means, you know, go and put those back in. I'm going to take a pause there before we start thinking about the water. See how you're getting on. Okay, so we're thinking about all the ripples in the water and the different colours in the water now. So doesn't really matter which way we go. I think I'm going to go get this bit in front of the boat done first before I think about this, because that bit we can bring into this is the beauty of the acrylics, you can bring a bit into the dark shadow. So when we're doing the boat, when we're doing the ripples in the water, ripples are much more straightforward than we think. And I think, you know, when we do it, we think, oh, where to start with so many colours. So the best way is just to break it down into sections of colour. And like anything, we get if we can, where we can, get the shadows in first, that's great. Because the last bits that come in are the bits that go over the top, like the light bits, you know, will go over the top. But what we can do is start to think about, because there are several colours on here. Obviously, we've got this kind of reddy colour in the water, almost a brown underneath that very dark section. And all we're doing is we're looking upside down at it and thinking, actually, this is slightly darker. And then popping these in. And I think it's just really interesting, isn't it, to look at that. So I'm going to think about these two colours just underneath, these reds and this browny colour there. I'm going to think about this shadowy colour, which is darker, isn't it, than this here, reflected in it. The very dark shadows, and then a couple of brighter ones to go over the top. So I'm going to forget about the brighter ones for now and just think about what's going underneath first. So I'm going to go in with the reds and differently to some of the other reflections we've done, because this has got quite a few ripples in it, we don't need to work them all into one another. We can keep those with that linear effect, those lines in there, which is the beauty of it. So let's mix some colours up. So I'm going in with a red, but I want it to be definitely to be a bit darker, and I want this brown. So I'm going to go straight in. Actually, I'm not even going to mix that brown. I'm just going to go in. Now, you can decide what brush you want to use, whichever is best for you, whether it's a thinner brush, whether it's just an ordinary brush, whether you stick with your whether you stick your flat brush, entirely up to you. I just know I want an extension here of this dark. I'm pulling it out, and it's not particularly even. So I might just use my brush on its side like that and bring it out. So it's coming out, comes round the corner a bit here, and it kind of sits on the top there, sitting on the top of this lighter brown one in here in the water. So we can only do it reflected how we personally see it, and we're all going to look at this differently, which is fantastic. And so I'm just looking at this kind of a slightly lighter brown colour to put in. So I'm going to mix up a bit of a light colour with that brown. And just get that kind of in a little bit here. And again, I'm pulling down, almost like pulling the reflections out a little bit with my brush, so it's not perfectly straight and kind of across like that. And I'm thinking about these lovely reds that I want to pop in there. So slightly darker in the water, I think. So I can go in with a bluey, or I can almost go in with a browny red at this side, I think. Over here, it's much more in the shade. So I'm going to add just a bit of that darker brown to my water. Or you could mix in the burnt sienna. Move on to a little bit. Go with a bit of burnt sienna into that red there. Just tone it a bit darker on this side. So let's see what happens. But what we're observing is the shape that it's making in that water. You know, sometimes it makes little shapes as you come out, doesn't it? No, it's a bit zigzaggy. And that's the bit that's really important when we're getting these ripples in. That just helps us, helps our brain understand that it is the ripples. And bring that bit further in up. That other red one sits over the top. I'm going to pop that in afterwards. And then we're coming around this side. It's a little bit of brighter. So I'm going to use this red straight on its own. I've got here. Bringing that in quite straight. So again, just observing the straightness, the angle, etc. I might even put a tiny bit of yellow into that reflection there, just because it feels a bit brighter than that one. And then we just, again, I've got, you could even, as I said, you could put a little bit of tiny bit of blue in if you wanted, just to make it not too bright. It's slightly reflected a bit darker in the water. The lighter ones, the brighter ones often are. So again, we're just observing the interesting colours and shapes it's making in that water. And at the moment, what will happen is our eyes are going to say, or our brain is going to say, oh no, 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 this is wrong. And we're going to override it because we're not going to see a finished thing until we've got a lot of those ripples in place. But in the meantime, our brain's doing a good job of saying, no, this looks terrible. So it's one of those instances where we have to ignore it and say, it's fine. There we go. Because, yeah, to see red in water is unusual. Now then, I'm just going to break up a little bit with some of this reddy colour again. It's in the middle here, seems to be in the water. And then thinking about what else we've got on there. So I'm going to go in and actually follow a pattern and a colour. I'm going to go in with this one over here, which is quite bluey, like quite dark bluey colour there. So I'm going to go in with this Payne's grey that I've had before, but as I said, you can pop a little bit of brown in there, real tiny amount with your other colours. I'm going to test that because I can't decide if it's dark enough. That needs to be quite dark. I'm going even darker. But again, we all like different things. So if something feels too dark, then don't go in lighter. Let me just check. That's sometimes difficult to tell when I'm still going a bit darker. Right. And then start to follow this pattern out. And the beauty is we can then, follow. So don't worry if this is really blocky. We'll soften it down with the other colours over the top. This is where the brain doesn't like it particularly. Quite all these lovely lines popping in and out. So I'm just bringing them into where I can see them. And it doesn't matter if I bring them in too far, for example, because we can soften them down with the other colours by overlapping those. Because it's acrylic, we've got that, that joy to do that. And you can even bring some of these darks over the top of your red, if you can see that anywhere. So we're still bringing those colours in and follow this patch all the way down, bringing it in a little bit more actually, just in case it needs to come a bit further. We can stretch it out where we can see it stretching out in there. Okay, so I'm also now going to go in with some of these really dark colours here. So I'm going to mix a combination of brown and Payne's grey to get this really much darker colour. And this is going to look, this is the bit where it's going to look really intense. So I'm just carefully placing where this is going to be. This is the bit that might shock our eye and go, oh no, can't be right. And then we've got broken up through this, we've also got this part of the boat reflected. So I'm going to try and break it up when I'm moving it in the water because it's showing that obviously that water is moving. Kind of helps create that shape around it as well. Bringing that right out there. So we're starting to kind of get a gist that this is coming round following this pattern. And then we've got this one in the water here. So I am going to get this one in a bit. Now it doesn't feel as intense as that. So I'm just going to add a little bit blue into that. But that's just the way I'm looking at it. Sometimes you have the shadow side and then the other side that's a bit lighter. You can always add more colour to it. I'm going to go in and put some slightly darker colours in there now. So you can see how we're just breaking down those shadows underneath the surface. And then I'm still going to go in with this dark colour over here. So I'm popping those in as well. Sometimes when it's so broken up, you can't see any of the dark shadows. Then all you can do is go in with the other mid-tones and then just fill in the ones. But because we've got heavy patterns of shadows that are much easier to see, it works. A little bit in the browns and palette. This is really, I know the title is Mesmerising Ripples, but it really is, isn't it? You know, it's like, wow, all these fabulous shapes and colours in there. And you know, you don't have to get it absolutely perfect. It's just kind of giving us a gist that there's that these are here. You've got some going that way. So you can kind of like stretch them both, you know, kind of start popping them that way if it's easier. And then going across. like that. And obviously we've got some light ones coming over the top, but we can sort those. So I'm just going to work in, we can work in some of the other colours in there as well. And then you can look, are there any, do you want to pull anything through any of these here? Like there's some really dark ones I've just seen now over here that I hadn't noticed before. I'm going to get those in. You can pull them through, like that one's pulled out. How water behaves, it's really interesting. And then what we've got to think about then is like what's going on between all this now. So, looking at some of the other mid-tones that go in between here. So I'm not talking about these highlights on top, come over the top. So the colour underneath there, it's the one between that one and the very lightest ones over here. So it's kind of going back and seeing if you can mix something. It's kind of a bit more blue in that, but it's not the brightest of all. So I'm going to look at some of the colours I've used in my boat. I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow to some of them. See what happens. And again, the other alternative is to use a colour you just think, I really like that. And there as well. There's nothing wrong with having a bit of a bright one, mixing something else in there. Go in with a bit more of that colour. Right, I think I'm happy with that. So what I'm doing now is I'm wiggling this in again. Now we can still wiggle the lighter colours over the top, so don't worry about that. But I am now starting to bring those in a little bit into other areas as well, because a lot of these lines are broken up. So I'm thinking about taking that in because it's not the brightest colour. I'm taking it over this side as well. And that breaks up the other bit of the water. And by the end of adding this, it'll really start to feel like we've got water in place here. The only thing you've got to watch is don't get too muddy. Although it is a bit grayer down there. I keep my colours fresh. So again, are any of those colours coming into the top where the red is as well? It could well be that they are. So by all means, bring those colours in. So maybe starting to get a sense that this is feeling much more like water now. Where else does it need to go? Does it need to go over this side a bit now and break up some of that? Yes, I think so. And it's not the only colour we've got left to put on, so we can just kind of get that down as a base. We've got something in place. See where it kind of crosses into. That's quite structured around this red, isn't it? Because that's quite a block of a reflection. And again, don't be frightened to bring it over. So that we've got those overlapping. And also we're looking at the colours that are coming down, which are slightly changing again. So I'm going to go in a bit more with a kind of a grey colour. Now what you can do, or you could make it a bit purpley. It's the other thing. And pop a tiny bit of red in there. Just rather than Payne's grey. Just to make it a little bit more grey-like. But you could even go with lilac or anything. So again here, I'm looking, observing how this overlaps there and how it overlaps the shadow on both sides. And I'm going to bring some into the colour above it as well, so it's not just one big patch down the bottom. Because we're looking at how these colours behave when we've got the ripples and where the colours are spread to. So again, I'm breaking that up. And again, I'm using that kind of same colour in here. Now we haven't got the highlight on, which is the bit that is missing right now, but we will do, so just bear with it while you're building these colours up. Again, I'm going to go between these two blocks here. You can even go down and make it quite straight if you want to. Same backwards and forwards through. Bring in another colour down here before I put the final light ones over the top, which will really start to transform that water into what we know as the water. Bring it in. Remember to keep bringing that light over, because the shadow is the one generally that's underneath anyway. And then I'm thinking now about what colour I want to go in with that's nice, much brighter over the top. So you can choose that. You choose how bright you go. It's your interpretation. So I'm getting some white. I don't feel it is bright white. I mean, there are a couple of places, but I feel it's a bit turquoisey, a bit cerulean-y. That's how I'm seeing it anyway. Maybe even a bit paler in there as well. But it's much brighter. So I'm going to need some more white in there for sure. And this is where you can only go in with what you personally can see and also what colours you like. Goodness, I mean, that's the joy of being an artist, is choosing colours that you like. So I could go for a more muted colour, but I'm not. I like this. So this is where we start to now look in and add any reflection colours over the top that are overlapping. And again, still building that picture up, but it'll start to really transform, make a difference soon. No, then I should have drawn that, painted that in. I've just realised that. When I'm looking, these colours are overlapping over the top of this underneath. So I'm just going to pop just going to pop this in. So I can bring some of these colours over it. Highlight in the middle there. Moving that highlight from side to side. It's really nice when you start to do this and you suddenly think, it's starting to look like water. It's like magic. Okay, so I'm put back in now, put that in. And then you can pull some of these shadows over it a little bit. And just go, wherever you think that they are, the lighter areas are, just go in with those, get those in. Pull it over. Start to all of a sudden, we'll start to really see how that's reflecting. Yeah, and then by all means go, if there's a much lighter area, then pop that in. There are occasional bits on here, aren't there, that just really do catch that. Just catch it coming over. And if you get one that's too bright, just soften it down a little bit. You can spread that out a little bit further. Are there any other ones, any other colours down here that you want to add across? And pop those in as well. On the other side, so we're looking for balance now, making sure we've got some of these nice brights over this side as well. Now, you might not get as many over this side just because it's more in the shadow, isn't it? So it might just be a slightly darker tone over this side that weaves through. That's fine. Whereas this side's got a lot more brightness to it. There we go. So we can, yeah, so we're just looking at the balance over there, really. You know, have we got the darks in the right place? Do we need to pop any more? I'm just going to pop like a little red bit of that over the top of here, kind of floating on its own, because sometimes it's these little extra bits in the water where we've got the colour, like that little bit of brown over there as well. Just adds a little bit sometimes to our painting with what the colours that we can see in there. See that bit over here as well. You know, I've just realised I've lost the bow a little bit in there. So the bow, you know, some of this colour, some of this shadow. So you can pop it up back a bit if you want to. And then there's just the other much calmer waters to bring in and the colour here, which is really, really simple. And again, we can bring that colour right into the edge here again, which creates that feel of water. So, oh gosh. So whichever colour you think, but you could go in with a bit of purple in here. If it feels a bit lilac-y, I might try that. So I haven't. I'm just going to put a little bit of, just a tad. So it's got more of a lilac-y grey feel to it. It's all for trying, isn't it, really? That's the beauty. It's like, have a little look at the tones. So we need quite a bit of light in there. Probably more than that because it's a big piece of water. And I may use 2 tones in there. Plenty of that white there. I've got to move it over here so you can see it. I've gone for this lilac, but I'm going to drop some blue in there. I think I'm going to pop some ultramarine blue in. So it's not quite as intense. And again, it's just about testing that. But again, you know, you can go in with any colour that you really like. I think I'm going to drop a bit more blue in there. Small bit at a time. I've done quite a lot with quite a lot of blue in there actually. It's quite a bit lighter now, so just going to tone it down a bit more light. And again, you know, just keep testing. So I think I'm going to go in with this as my base colour just because I do like that. There you go. I'll water that down and then I'm going to use, just put actually a tiniest bit of Payne's Grey in there, which is slightly darker, just to kind of take some of the really bright lilac out. Just kind of knocks it down a little bit when you put these colours in. Right, knocks it back a bit. And there we go, you know. Just enough water to give it a good coverage so it moves nicely. And I've kind of going in with I've still got my flat brush. I've done a lot of this painting in the flat. One, because it gives really good coverage. And also you can get kind of the lines of the water in there as well. So if you want another colour in there and you want to kind of blend the two together, then make sure it's still wet to get the other colour in. But if you're not too worried, it's quite fine, isn't it? It's very soft and gentle, this area outside of the ripples. Which is enjoyable, isn't it? So if you're not wanting too many lines in there, just keep it moving quite quickly. Keep it a bit more damp, but you need plenty of paint on your brush. I'm just going in. That like that. I'm working that in, this reflection at the side, over the top there. Keep it feeling natural. It's nice that we've got this balance of this very calm waters over this side, to be fair. I think that works really well. Gives a real serene finish to it, doesn't it? Move the top of this up for a moment. So again, if you're wanting to put any other kinds of colours in there, like I might be tempted just to weave in some slightly darker ones that's got this kind of a nice bluey tone, just so it ties it together a bit. So I'm going to just get this darker colour that I mixed earlier, along with some white. I've just gone too light actually. There we go. And bring in some of that tone in so that it brings a little bit of what I was talking about earlier, wasn't it? Just a bit of balance in there. Because the rest of my board is still a bit wet, and just bring that through. So because we can see just at the edge, I'm going to put a bit of blue in there to be fair. It's not showing up on the paper. I'm just bringing in, just on the edge, just some little bits of, just so we get a sense that there are, that this is still part of the sea. Now we probably won't be able to see it because it's very subtle. There's not a huge contrast because there isn't over here, but I'm just weaving in this other slight colour between, just so that we know that there is water here. And then both ways then. And bring in a little bit of a suggestion that there's the ocean there, but without it, you can just do it quite easily at your own leisure because it's such a subtle contrast. You can't see it really well, but it's enough there that we know that there are there is another part of the water which is just a bit calmer. Well, maybe not calmer, but it's not as if it's still in the same bit. It's just there's no reflection in this bit. And that's all I'm going to do with that. I mean, it's just, you know, you could go in with an even darker one if you wanted to, but I'm not really going to do much contrast at all here. And it's just blending it so that there's as much or as little as you want, really. So where it's near the edge of the boat, I'm just going to blend that a little bit more. So it's kind of going off and behind the boat. It's not kind of taken away from that area. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you could bring another lighter colour in as well. It's just slightly lighter, and bring that in into some of the areas. That's another thing. But again, I'm just going to keep it really subtle because I don't want it to take away from this area of the painting as well. That's the other thing. If you have too many highlights over here, you tend your eyes drawn there, whereas it's this bit I want to be, you know, drawing the attention in. So I think that's my final pause. And I hope that's really been really helpful. And I'm going to come back, see how everybody's getting on. So, I mean, I suppose the only other thing you might want to do is just go back to your boat now and have a look. Is there any areas in your boat that you think, I'm just going to make that slightly, it's probably not, that's a bit too light, but are there any areas in my boat I just want to make a, you know, put a bit more shape to, for example, that I didn't do earlier. I'm being a bright there actually, because I just thought, that feels like it needs to be a bit lighter. So that's the other thing you could do, is just have a little look. Is there anywhere that you want to, looking over your whole painting, just add any little changes to? But it's just the enjoyment and looking at how the shapes of the ripples and everything work. It's really fascinating, isn't it? So I hope you enjoyed that.